at the end, and I'm sure they would be more than happy to answer questions after the program. So.
Excellent, thank you. Well, good morning. It's nice to be back, even if it is during Jesus's fake out. You know, I wish I could just be like, all right, I'm out. I'm going home. But my job won't let me do that. Jason, can you help me get my screen back up, please? So this is going to be interactive. So do me a favor and get out your phone now, because when this bad boy pops up, I'm going to have you log into something. And I'm going to treat you all just like I treat my high schoolers. Thank you, sir. So excellent. So I'm Nikki Actipis. If you can, while I'm giving kind of my introduction, hop on to, it should say join PD up there, and then you'll put in this code. It will link you to kind of an interactive slideshow that we're going to do kind of thing. Yeah. So I'll give you a minute or so to hop on. I'll probably repeat myself about 1,000 times. That's what I have to do on a daily basis. So again, I'm Nikki Actipis. Currently, I am a high school teacher, a life science high school teacher at Wyandotte High School over on the Kansas City, Kansas side. I've been there for about 3 years now. Before that, in my prior life, I was a field scientist, field researcher. I've been around the world, around the country, doing all kinds of things. But now that I have a bum leg, it's probably not in my best interest to do a lot of hiking on my own or for a job anymore. But yeah, so I am here today and I see, excellent, you are all on the ball this morning. Usually it takes about 10 minutes for kids to log in. There's like, do I really have to? No, it's not supposed to go down. Stop it. So this morning, we are going to talk about scientific practices, especially involving around black bodies. This will not be a comfortable conversation. It is not designed to be a comfortable conversation or a presentation. And as I can see here, the majority of our audience, at least here, is white. And this might be new information for you. It might not. But I find it very important. It is super important as a white passing individual, and I say white passing because even though my mom is a nice translucent white, my dad is not. But I present as white, right? So I am here to talk to you as a white passing person, giving you this information. So yeah, but kind of just wanted to get that out of the way. Let's see if my clicker is going to work on this bad boy. Maybe I have to click start class. There we go. Y'all are logged in. You know my talk already, what we're going to talk about. So I've kind of given this disclaimer already. As a white passing person or a white person coming in here and talking to you about stuff that has happened to black and brown bodies, I am speaking from my position of privilege. I have gone to school, I have 3 degrees, so this information has been disseminated to me through my educational practices or my academic years. Also, I have access to this stuff, right? Whereas a lot of other people might not have access to this information or might not have been afforded the opportunity. I'm not here to debate you all on this. I'm not here to pander to the, well, white people also kind of deal. I'm not here to do that. So please don't do that to me because you're going to get not polite response necessarily. You'll get a polite response, but it will be kind of not nice. Also, a trigger warning. So I tried my best to not put images in here that are too over the top. But a couple of them might be a little uncomfortable. Also, the information we are talking about is not comfortable. So if you need time or space and you get up and you're just like, man, I need to go think about this in the hallway for a second, that's cool. I'm not going to be offended. My kids walk out of class all the time just for the fun of it. So I'm not going to be offended. Also, there's the potential for swearing out of my mouth, just because I get heated when I talk about these things. Because a lot of them are disgusting. So there's a potential that I might drop a couple not nice words. I don't see any small children, but if you are a Puritan that's like, man, I can't stand the F word, then you probably should leave now. Okay. So we are going to start off with this. So on your phones, it should pop up. There should be a nice little text box. And my question to you is, and I'm going to give you probably less than 2 minutes because my time is short here today. Tell me, who is this person and why do they matter? So I'm going to give you 1 minute to think, 1 minute to type. And I'll tell you in a minute here why we are starting with this person, give you a little bit more background kind of deal. So the history in America, especially in the U.S., we are specifically talking about U.S., around specifically medical practices and medical experimentation on black and brown bodies is a long, gross history. I have 25 minutes. Not going to get through all of the things. I've picked some highlights, and by highlights, I mean the things that stand out to me the most and might be familiar to some people already. And that's kind of where I want to start the conversation. Okay. I'll give you about 30 more seconds. I see 20, 21 have responded. We'll give it a couple more seconds. Again, you guys are like on the ball. I'm not having to pull teeth this morning. You're making me feel confident, which is nice, makes me feel good. That I'm hopefully not going to shout into the void. Okay, give you about 10 more seconds for those last 4 people. So, and I should say, if you put your name on this, you put your real name, like I am the only one that's going to be able to see them. So like when I switch over to answers, like nobody else is going to see them. So if you are super embarrassed, it's only going to be my eyes later, be like, haha, this person's goofy kind of thing. Nobody else is going to see it. Okay. So let's see what folks said. Excellent. Right off the bat, Henrietta Lacks. Her DNA has been studied for a long time, okay. More specifically, cervical cancer cells used in all kinds of research for their ability to replicate themselves. And I'm going to add outside of the human body. She nor her family have been compensated for this. That is like the perfect summary. So we've got a couple of incorrect answers, which is fine. But I'm going to have to say, not Anne Frank. No, definitely not. You tried. I appreciate it, though. So I wish I knew. Okay, well, that person that you wish you knew, you're going to learn more about her. I don't know. First female black doctor. Okay, nurse. Okay, I don't know. And I don't know. Today, I don't know is a valid response because when we talk about science, I don't know can be followed up with, okay, well, let's figure this out, right? So we've got a few people here. Definitely not Rosa Parks kind of deal. So our first few people, definitely correct. This is Henrietta Lacks. And you can start doing this now, but I'm going to talk about Henrietta for a second. So my question up here is, take the little person that you see on your screen and move it to the bar. Put your person on there. So the first time you heard about her was in elementary school, middle school, high school age, college, young adult, older adult, or you were today years old. Just kind of getting some feedback here. So those first 2 answers, though, were spot on. So this is Henrietta Lacks. So in 1951, Miss Lacks went to Johns Hopkins Hospital in, oh God, my geography today, help me out, where is it? Baltimore, there you go. I'm a science teacher. The geography, not my deal. So she went to Johns Hopkins complaining of stomach pain, pelvic pain, and when she got there, the doctors knew. They looked, they knew she had cervical cancer. They did a biopsy. So if you don't know what a biopsy is, especially on a cervix, it's not a fun time. We will talk about that here in a moment. And they did all the tests. They even took some radioactive material, tied it around her cervix to kind of treat that cervical cancer at the time. And unfortunately, they did not do enough for this woman. Even back in the 1950s, they could have done more, and she passed away. Okay, so that is the short rundown of Henrietta Lacks. But that is not why we're here today. it is her cells. Her cells are why we are here today. So her cells, now known as HeLa cells, so capital HeLa, HeLa cells, they are used worldwide in not just medical experimentations, but me as a science teacher, I could go and order a vial of these cells when I get home, and they are relatively inexpensive. So you're probably wondering, what is the big deal with these cells? This was the first time, because scientists for a very long time were trying to replicate human cells outside of the body. But if you know anything about cells, if cells are not connected to the rest of their organism, they typically die off, which makes sense. But with Henrietta's cancer cells, they not only lived, they started reproducing, and they started reproducing rapidly. And if you are not a scientist, this is a big deal, because you can do experiments without the human, which is great, right? The unfortunate thing is that this woman, she did not give consent to this, for her cells to be kept like this. They did not tell her what was going on, and they also profited off these cells, and people are still profiting off her cells today. Oh no. I will keep talking, this is fine. So they are still profiting off her cells today. What's worse is her family still to this day has not received any compensation, not really received a good apology. They've received kind of like a half apology of like, oh, well, like it was for science kind of deal. And her family still lives in poverty today. They're still having health problems. Nobody has helped these people out, which is sad and gross, right? What's even worse is this was not out of the norm, especially for when we're talking about Black people in the US. And you'll notice I do not use African American because not all Black people that are in our country came from Africa, okay? So I'm gonna use the phrase Black people, white people, Black folk, white folks, whatever kind of deal, okay? So is there any, what's up? Oh, it just timed out? Okay, I was like, help. Or maybe my computer just turned off. That is unfortunate. Okay. No, you've got battery. What are you doing, kid? Oh, we're good. It's got enough battery, thank you, though. So, let's see. So your responses. So we've got a kind of a plethora of responses. Oh, again, Jason. Nope, I can just do this, can't I? Nope. I know my friends back there probably be like, haha, I just told you you were the IT person and now you can't figure this out. I hear you laughing, that's fine. We're all good. So, thank you, Jason. Thank you for saving the day again. So, this is a good kind of mix. I was really hoping I wasn't gonna see just in the today years old kind of deal. But some of you all, middle school, high school area, young adult, college age, older adult, and then today years old, okay? So, the reason why we are talking about her. So here's her timeline, and you might be able to see it a little bit better on your cell phone kind of deal. But here's her timeline. So she got her first biopsy in 51, and for several years she lived with this condition until she died. And then afterwards, people were still using her cells. So they used her cells to create a vaccine for polio. They've made plenty of other vaccines. The HPV vaccine was created with her cells, all of that. So she's a big deal, and not a lot of people know her name. And the reason why I'm starting with her today is because I did not learn about her until college. And I often have a unit that I talk to my freshmen about this with, because I work in a majority of Black and brown school, and I do not want to be a gatekeeper. So I'm starting with Henrietta because she is near and dear to my heart. But she's not the only, she is one of the many examples in our history, in our country's history, of the mistreatment of Black and brown people for science. Okay. So we're going to start off way back at the beginning, or not actually even near the beginning, but we're going to start off with slavery, Civil War, and Jim Crow era. So I know this is a big time area that we're going to talk about, but I have a few examples, and let's see. We're going to, okay. So believe it or not, probably more believe it than not, during pre-U.S. Civil War era, there were experiments on black slaves, because that's no-brainer. Think, yeah, of course, we were doing all kinds of crazy shit, right? So the biggest thing was that oftentimes that slave owners, when a black slave would die, they would donate their body to a med school. And typically when we think about this, we're thinking about the South. It was not just the South. So even free slave states, so when we were making that decision on whether we were going to be a slave state or not, even if you were not a slave state, you still got bodies to your med school, black slave bodies, to do medical practices on or medical experiments on. And I'm bringing this up because we like to have this conversation of oh, the North was so good about giving rights to black people. They were still using black bodies. They were still using black slaves to advance medicine and to advance their practices. So nobody is innocent here, okay? So one of the things I want to point out here is, though, so I'm going to do a show of hands, and I know on Facebook Live you're not going to see this. Show of hands if you've heard before or somebody has taught you that black bodies are more tolerant of pain than white bodies. Yeah, okay. So that's about half, right? So at some point you've learned this, whether you believe it or not now, different story. But this is going to come up later. So the reason why I'm bringing this up now is that even though back then, so this originated far back in the day, the belief that black bodies could tolerate pain more than white bodies, came back pre-Civil War. Medical practitioners could see barely no differences between black and brown bodies. So if there are no differences between black and brown bodies compared to white bodies, why would you think that it's cool to be oh yeah, they experience less pain? They were trying to make themselves feel better, right? To justify it. So just keep that in the back of your mind, okay? So medical schools not only took in deceased slaves, they also took in sick slaves, so they would advertise, oh, hey, slavers, plantation owners, you want your slaves to get better? We can help them. We can give them health care. But they were actually practicing medical experiments on them. And slavers were just that's cool. We'll just buy more. Oh, I should have just plugged this in. This is my bad, y'all. But Jason, I know how to fix this now, maybe. Now maybe come back. It's okay. My kids aren't watching, so they won't see that I'm messing up, because they're just oh yeah, Mix Actipus knows what they're doing. Okay. So the reason why they use black bodies even in free states is because there were no repercussions, right? If you're experimenting on somebody who's a slave, nobody's really gonna care. They were rendered physically visible by their skin color, but were legally invisible, right? We know this from our own experiences in history class, that they had nothing, no rights, okay? So here's a nice little case study. So our friend, Dr. Bennett, this he's something. So he was an elite white man, enslaver, physician, and all around just human scumbag. And so from an early age, he was fascinated with medical stuff. And his claim to fame is having kept this infant black slave girl for a multitude of years that had developed a tumor when she was about 4 weeks old. And instead of treating her, he watched the tumor grow for years. For 17 years, he watched this tumor grow. And he kept detailed records of the growth of this thing. And I think it was about, what does it say? About the age of 6, it was already the size of an ostrich egg. So this tumor was like started right behind her ear. And if you can imagine for a 6-year-old to have like an ostrich egg behind their ear, how painful that is, let alone just like a nuisance to sleep on. He kept records of this. And she died around the age of 17 because she had complications with it. And instead of giving her a proper burial, he decided to dissect her. And he kept her skull. And after he was like, oh, cool, not a cool mantelpiece anymore because people frown upon this, he donated it to the University of Maryland's Medical Museum collection. And I could not find any information on this, and like, probably for the best for my own sanity, I'm willing to bet they still have this somewhere. If anybody finds the information or wants to tell me, cool. Probably not for all of our mental health, probably not a great thing. But I'm willing to bet that they still have this because my mother can attest to the zoo in Toledo. I'm 95% sure still has fetuses in jars from many moons ago. So I'm willing to bet if this is in their medical collection that this poor girl's skull is still on display somewhere. Okay. So this man, not the exception, but most definitely the rule. And this is a drawing. So they don't even give her name, so history has lost her name, so that's even worse. She didn't even have a name to go off of, and we don't know. We don't know her name. We don't know where the rest of her is. But yeah, so all around just terrible human being. Maybe. So fast forwarding a few years to when we are now in the Civil War. So if you don't know about race corrections, so like if you go in for like medical diagnostics or you've been to your GP lately, you know, you have to mark down like I'm white, I'm black, I'm Hispanic, or what have you. So they say that information's for demographic purposes, but oftentimes it has to do with race corrections. So again, gonna bring this back up. What I said earlier, that we believe, or we did believe for a very long time, that black people's bodies can experience more pain without having a problem. This nice, lovely race corrections is based on that. So for example, during the Civil War, black soldiers, if you don't know what a spirometer is, it is to measure your lung capacity. Yours truly has had to do one of these when I was out doing a lot of hiking. But they said, oh yeah, black soldiers have lower lung capacity than white soldiers. And they base this whole race corrections around this data. And this data is gonna come back up later. But I just want to point this out now. So this is back during Civil War era, so like a couple hundred years ago now. So think about, just keep this in your brains for later. Okay. So back to your Pear Deck. Now is your opportunity to tell me what this lovely instrument is. And I think you have 3 options. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds, and I'm going to warn you, the picture after this is a lovely anatomical drawing. So that might narrow down your choices there. So go ahead, make a choice, and we'll see if I can pull up our results. Give you about 10 more seconds. Got 18 people, folks. I need 10 more. I need 10 more responses, or 11 more, excuse me. So make a choice, even if you don't know, it's a 33% chance that you're gonna get this right. And it's not a duck. It's not a mechanical duck, I will tell you that right now. Not a mechanical duck. Okay, gave you about 10 more seconds because I need 3 more responses. Let's see what you all said. Oh, excellent. I was really hoping none of you were going to say sausage extruder or ice cream scoop, but I thought I was going to have some shenanigans this morning. So do we know what a speculum is for? Yes. Well, unfortunately, I'm going to show you a picture anyways. So here's the lovely speculum. So if you you are not on the Pear Deck and you did not answer, or if you didn't know and you were too embarrassed to put an answer down, that's fine. Here is a speculum, and specifically a vaginal speculum. So this lovely piece of equipment is meant to be inserted into the vagina to open it up so the doctor can peek inside and be like, that's a nice looking cervix you have. And then they will jab it with whatever, like a Q-tip to get samples, all that fun stuff. Typically, historically, they are made from metal. Nowadays, they're transitioning over to plastic because they're quote-unquote more comfortable. No. Just no. Like, that's not true. It's not true. Like, don't lie to me. Just tell me. So, yes, speculum. You're probably thinking, well, why are we talking about a speculum? Is this not about experimenting on black bodies? Well, here's why. So this is my most hated man that I have in my life that I know of, and he's been dead for centuries. So James Marin Sims is commonly referred to as the father of gynecology and or sadist. I affectionately refer to him as that fucking guy. Because, yeah, he was something. So Dr. Sims is the inventor of the speculum. So if you are an owner of a vagina, you're welcome. Thank this man today. He's the one who created it. Because prior to the speculum, doctors would have to go in and just do the hello. Which not super sanitary because they did not have good gloves back then. So this man was like, yes, I need a window into the vagina. And he created it, which is great, right? It helps us keep sterilized during medical procedures nowadays. But how he went about making this instrument was not great. And Elizabeth back there is going to love this word. I used a word we learned. He also came up with a lot of practices for repairing vaginal fistulas. And that's a different story about fistulas later, we'll put over here. But he is known for creating these techniques of repairing these fistulas. So if you don't know what a fistula is, it is an opening somewhere that's not supposed to be there, and oftentimes they need to be repaired because you might get bacteria in it otherwise, which is not great. So here's where we get to the gross, nasty part of this man. So, believe it or not, this man experimented on black female slaves. And we know the names of the women now, but for a long time their names were lost to history. So he leased these women, so they weren't even his slaves. He went to a slaver like it was a car dealership and was like, yes, give me 3 of your finest so I can experiment on them, not kindly. And so he had them in his possession for many years, and he told them, he's like, I'm going to do experiments in gynecology on these women. So here's the fun bit on this. So around the same time when he started experimenting is when anesthesia was used for the first time surgically, because I know maybe this argument may come up, and we will have words. If you are a Sims apologist later, that's fine. So anesthesia was available when he was doing these procedures, but he did not use them. He did not use anesthetics on these women to do his experiments. And a lot of Sims apologists will be like, well, it was new. It was new, so how did he know? Well, he knew because after he perfected his lovely little techniques, he would then go be a practitioner on white women and use anesthetics. So, and I will get in a fist fight with somebody about that. So this man, for years, practiced on these women without anesthesia, without their consent. And I think they all survived, if I remember correctly. But holy cow, if you don't own a vagina and like you don't know like what people say about cervixes, that shit hurts. It hurts even when they numb it up. So if you can imagine, these women were subjected to not great practices. And my slideshow, are we going to come back? No, we're not going to come back. So here in a moment, if it decides to come back. So the reason why I'm talking about this guy is because for centuries he's gotten praise, and it's only been within the last 10, 15 years that women's rights activists have been like, hold on, he is a terrible human. And this matters because in New York, there used to be a giant statue of this man, like doing one of these poses, like hero poses, in, can't remember which park. My notes are gone, so I can't tell you which park. And about, I think 4 years ago, it was finally taken down. So people finally came out, there's like, no, we do not want this man's statue up around anymore. And there were people that threw a fit. There's like, yeah, well, he did such great work. He saved so many lives. But how many lives did he have to make worse for his experiments? Kind of deal. Oh, geez. That's the button I had to press. Excellent. So the reasoning for him not using anesthetics was the same reason I gave you all earlier about, well, black people don't feel pain, so why does it matter? Which we know is BS, right? Because we also have the thought of, well, black bodies and white bodies look exactly the same on the inside and outside, so we're just making up excuses at this point, right? So this is probably one of my favorite pictures ever. This is what I'm saying. So his lovely statue was taken down. Yeah, get out of here. And then a couple years ago, so we are now calling them the mothers of gynecology because they deserve that respect. This statue now is in Montgomery in a park. Again, I don't remember, bad with names. And they're finally getting the credit they deserve. Kind of too little too late, because we still don't talk about them in science classes. We don't talk about them in history classes. But yes, so they are now getting the recognition. We are now moving away from Mr. Sims, which is nice. So, how much more time have I got? Oh, snap. I need to move fast. So we are going to talk about beyond emancipation and from the 1900s to today. So show of hands, who is familiar with the Tuskegee syphilis experiment? Excellent, that's what I like to see. So we do not just call it the Tuskegee experiment for the sole fact that sounds like the people from Tuskegee were the ones to blame for this, not the medical practitioners. So when you talk about this, it is the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. This study went on for 40 years, and it had overlap with some of the other shenanigans that I'm going to talk about here in a second. It was done in a poor black community, and already at the time, this community had distrust in any authority, specifically medical practitioners coming in. So how they got black men to sign up for this, because it was specifically on black men, and then their families, after their wives got syphilis, because they had syphilis, whole situation. They were just like, oh yeah, to bring these black men, there's like, well, we're more family oriented. Bring your family, bring your kids, bring your wife. Like, we'll treat everybody, right? So spoiler alert, they were not actually treating these gentlemen. So they would give them injections, they would give them placebos that were not actually treating them, okay? So after a couple years, you would think, okay, well, they would give this up, right? This went on for 40 years. So this timeline matters is because in conjunction with this study at around the same time, they did a similar study on a white community. And after about a year or two, they stopped. They was like, we're not getting the data we need, or that we've got enough data, and they stopped. They was like, we need to discontinue this. But on the other hand, they continued for years on this community. So not only did it affect the men who were already infected, so they did not get their medical care, it affected their families because, as people do, they're going to go home and have intimate times with their wives. And then that gets then passed on to any children who are born. Because believe it or not, you can pass STIs on to your babies when they're being born, okay? So fun little highlight here is that there were ways to treat these individuals, but experimenters at times would be like, oh no, don't give them that thing. That's going to cure them, and then we can't see what syphilis is doing to them. Experimenters literally stop these people from getting treated because they wanted their data. And they will tout, there's like, oh yeah, we got to see the natural progression of syphilis, okay? You don't need 40 years to know that. You don't need 40 years, okay? Okay, well, come on, computer. Aha, okay. So Jason informed me I'm running out of time, so I'm going to speed through this one. So this one is a little bit less well known. So during World War II, so this is about in the same time the Tuskegee experiment was happening. There's substantial overlap. 60,000 enlisted men were brought into a study about mustard gas. And if you know anything about mustard gas, it is not good. And this was under wraps for a long time. It was classified for a long time. So 60,000 men were enlisted, enrolled in the secret government program, and this information was not declassified until 93. And it was not until 2008 that we actually got a full or more broader scope of what was happening. So white and black soldiers were recruited, and by recruited I mean voluntold, for this program, but the majority of white soldiers were placed into control groups. So if you don't know anything about science, that means that that is your de facto group that nothing's going to happen to, and you're just going to watch them, right? You might give them a placebo. While black soldiers were put into groups to actually have mustard gas imposed upon them. And if you don't know anything about mustard gas, from the second that you are exposed to it, your DNA starts changing. So your DNA starts mutating, okay? So some of these folks died relatively young, and they couldn't even go, so even when they had medical problems after they got out of the military, they could not go to their doctors. Even if they had symptoms, they could go, but they couldn't say, well, hey, I was in this experiment. Because if they would have told anybody about what happened to them, they would have been dishonorably discharged. Their benefits would have been taken away, which is a different story about military benefits. And also, they might have gone to jail for seeking medical help for something that our government did to them, okay? So, not a good time, not great. So a couple years ago, these gentlemen are probably still not around because at the time of the article in 2015, they were like 93. So there were survivors that lasted even after being experimented on, but they had long-term effects. So this gentleman, so this lovely jar right here is a jar of his own skin that had been peeling off for 70 years. 70 years. Our government did this to him, okay? So he could not speak about this, again, because he didn't want to go to jail. So when he did finally start speaking up, he was like, well, shit, I'm going to carry around a jar of my skin to show people what they've done to me. So skin falling off, but some folks ended up with COPD, asthma, leukemia, eye diseases, all of that. Okay, so even 70 years later, our government did not want to admit to this or help them out. Okay, so I'm wrapping up. I might take a couple of extra minutes. Sorry, Jason. So why does any of this matter? So he was like, well, we don't do that stuff now. That was back in the day. Like, people had different ethics. Wrong answer. We knew better, okay? We know better now still, and we are still doing this crap, okay? So why this matters now? Because this information, so remember the race correlation, or race correction, excuse me, I told you about earlier? We are still using it. We are still using it, and we're using it to deny Black and brown patients health care. Say, well, we have to correct for that. You're Black. We have to correct for that. So maybe like your pain is not really that severe. Or, well, you can't have that symptom because that's not, if we use the race correction, that's not what happened in there. We are still using it. And there's only a few medical organizations that are finally speaking up against this. There's like, well, hold on, like that's not great kind of deal. We are still using it though, okay? So up here, removal of race correction in pulmonary function tests show more prevalent and severe lung disease among Black patients. So this is a journal article, peer-reviewed journal article, that they pulled out. There's like, well, we're not going to use the race correction in our study here. Once they pull it out, they're seeing that, oh snap, people are having this problem. We've just been kind of ignoring it, okay? So that study is from 2021, so that is 2 years ago. 2 years ago, this study. And this is new information. This is now just coming out, okay? We also know that in Black communities, Black and brown communities, there is a higher rate of mortality for common diseases. Because, again, we use race correction, where it's like, oh, you can't have that, you're Black, kind of deal, okay? So Black people face higher mortality rates for stuff that white folks get treated for more often. Okay. And then finally, the last one up here, as I try to trip and kill myself today, COVID-19. We all just went through the same pandemic, and this article was near the beginning of the pandemic, end of the first year. U.S. Blacks 3 times more likely than whites to get COVID-19. 3 times more likely. And who were the last communities to get vaccinated? Black and brown communities. Okay. So this stuff matters. So we might think this is in the past. Oh, it doesn't happen anymore. It's fine. We know better. We're still using junk information, junk racist information. So lastly, before I ask for questions, so again, my deal. I love Henrietta Lacks, and I want to honor her the best way I can. That's what I try to do in my practices as a teacher and as a scientist. But I want to leave you with, since 1951, since the day her cells were stolen from her, research that has been done by use of her cells has saved over 10 million lives. 10 million lives. Okay. So this legacy was forced upon her. She did not ask for this. Her family is not compensated in any way. Her family still lives in poverty. And stuff like this is still happening all over the US, regardless of what we think about how we have ethics. Stuff like this is still happening. And that's it. If you have questions, go ahead, put them in the Pear Deck, because I can pull them up. Or if you want to be old-fashioned, you're welcome to get a mic. But that is all I have for you. I know I had to speed through, and I was being technologically inept today, so thank you for listening. And I think I saw Nate's hand first, but I will also pull up questions on here.
Okay, we're going to do 2 real quick questions because we're kind of running out of time.
Oh no, how do I get the mouse over here? Okay, there we go.
Yeah. So is this the kind of thing that I wouldn't be able to, like my kids would not be able to be taught in Florida right now?
Absolutely. 150% absolutely. So we don't even, so as a science teacher, I have to weasel stuff like this into my curriculum. So that's an excellent question. So I'm going to start with here. So we have a pretty straight up strict curriculum around biology, but like once in a while I'll be like, hey, we're deviating from this kind of deal. And my AP and my principal respect me. Well, that's questionable sometimes. But there's no room in our curriculum for this. Like, we've not created space, which is dumb. But this is exactly stuff that you would, if you are a Florida child with, or a Florida parent with Florida children, this is exactly stuff that you're not going to learn. They're not going to even touch for fear of getting fired, right? I would, because, like, screw that. I'd be like, fire me. I'm a science teacher. Fire me, baby. Like, you can't find any of us. But yes, this is exactly what they would not be teaching in Florida.
Do you want to take one off the
Yes.
board there?
Weren't the Tuskegee experiments essential in the advent of informed consent standards? Yes. Yes, and. So if you don't know what informed consent is, it is when you go in to a wherever, really. So, like, even if you sign up for an experiment, or even if you go to the doctor and there's like, hey, we're going to take a biopsy, you have to sign a form saying, hey, I understand what's happening. And, like, sometimes, well, they should. You'll have, like, this nice little rundown of, like, what's going to happen to the samples that are taken from your bodies nowadays. So Henrietta's case is also part of this reason. But it's telling you, hey, like, this is what's going to happen to you. This is what's going to happen to your tissue samples. Do you have any questions, kind of deal. And they have to be, and ethically they should be, upfront. So they can't trick you and say, oh, this is what we're doing, but actually do something else.
I was going to say, I think we'll do
Yes.
more questions afterwards.
Yes. And if you have, like, I can leave this up to, like, you guys can put questions in here. I can also give you my contact information. And before, I know we're on time schedule. Side note, in our school, this is my quick elevator speech. So we have period inequality at my school. Again, I work for KCKPS. So what I do is I raise funds and or receive donations for period products. So if you would like to make sure that our children have period products, come talk to me later. I take donations. I take monetary and physical donations for that. So thank you. I will shut up now.
All right, and we'll bring up Wyatt for one more musical moment, and then we'll close out for the day. As soon as we get this figured out, I'm not tech savvy.